Jim, Oxfam has been a big champion of the rights of individuals living in some of the most vulnerable communities in the world, but has also been really at the center of this debate around inequality and the food system, which currently is at a breaking point. Many companies are moving on this agenda because they're seeing a world in which the entire profits of the food industry could be wiped away by 2020, which is just 5 years away, because of climate change impacts on the supply chain, disrupted shipping lanes. As Oxfam, you're looking at this challenge and calling on food companies, holding them accountable for continuing to evolve their practices to ensure that their benefits are shared more fairly, that they're building resilience in those communities. What are some of the changes that you'd like to see as Oxfam happen in the food industry? Where would you like to see business leadership on this agenda? And what are the kinds of actions you would like to see companies take that would really provide living examples of what the Ruggie principles stand for and what we're all trying to achieve as we look at a just and equitable transition to an economy where we keep emissions within net zero?
Thanks, Rajiv, and thanks for having us here. It's great as Oxfam to be represented in the room. And just to say that there's a few Oxfam alumni around the room. I see Heather and Phil Bloomer and Rajiv, yourself, and even Mary Robinson is a former president of Oxfam International. And there may be some others. Don't be shy. You can admit it. Anyway, I suppose it's As you know, we've been working on issues of social justice, human rights, inequality for many years, and I suppose the irony of the global food system is that many of the people who produce the food that we eat, enjoy, and take for granted are the poorest and most hungry on the planet. And unfortunately, this situation is not getting any better. The link between climate and hunger is explicit. And we see the devastating impact that climate change is having right now, not in 10, 15, 5 years' time, whenever. It's happening at the moment. And you can see it in many of the countries, the poorer countries in the world. And I visited many rural communities in countries like Malawi and Uganda, where you see that long predicted cropping times and harvesting times are now changing and shifting. You have flash floods, you have droughts that can't be anticipated. And you have a whole other plethora of problems, flooding, that are impacting on what were the normal kind of ways that people expected to produce food. And also, we developed this Behind the Brands campaign because we see that the 10 largest food and beverage companies in the world, some of whom are represented here, very happy to see, have such an important role to play in this global food system. And what we have been looking at in that, we've been looking at it through the lens of 7 different indicators: transparency, water, land, women's rights, workers' rights, farmers' rights, and climate. So here we just probably speak to climate, but there are so many other ways that the food companies themselves can have a really positive impact on the lives of people living in poverty, and for their own benefit also. I mean, this is important to see that the predictions for the future are pretty grim. The IPCC in its 5th assessment have said that the production of wheat and maize is already dropping around the planet. And it's estimated that food production, based on our current trajectory, will drop by 2% per decade in future decades, whereas demand is going to rise dramatically. And we see that up to an additional 50 million people will be in hunger by 2050. And we're going to sign in 3 days' time a declaration that ends poverty, ends hunger in the next 15 years. So these two things are not matching up as we see it at the moment. And obviously the poorest people in the world are the most impacted. They're the ones that had least to do with causing the problems of climate change. There's a real injustice that needs to be resolved here. And we also see that this part of the world, as has been highlighted here, and as we know through industry, has such a key role to play and has a self-interest also. And this is something that the more enlightened companies we're seeing have been looking at this for quite some time and realize that the unsustainability of the entire value chain is going to damage companies as well. And we're and they're kind of at the front line of a lot of what's going to happen. So we're very grateful that the companies involved have been willing to participate in this program. It's a kind of an insider-outsider program. I was speaking with John upstairs. Sometimes they really hate us, and sometimes we're okay. But to their credit, we see some movement. And I mean, just to put it in context, the 10 biggest food companies, when you look at their carbon emissions, 264 million tons per annum, it would result in them being the 25th largest polluter on the planet. So they would be greater than the combined emissions of Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. So they're in a unique position because not only are they seeing the pressure from public and others, but also they're seeing the real result of what is their future business. And obviously, they have a huge responsibility and opportunity to make a big, big difference. As I say, on all those other human rights issues I mentioned, but specifically this evening we talk about climate. So what we want to see and we are seeing is commitments in relation to the reduction on emissions and commitments throughout the value chain and transport and so many other ways that improvements can be made, and also to use this extraordinary public voice and presence that they have. I mean, we all heavily rely on these brands, these global brands these companies produce. We're huge consumers, and we're very powerful. 230,000 people have signed up to put pressure and encourage and cajole. I'm using my Irish accent in Mary's honor. Companies to really step up and make the kind of changes that are necessary. And we've seen the General Mills and Kellogg's have agreed to implementing industry-led measures to cut greenhouse gas emissions from the supply chains. And not only that, but also to look at political action. So, I mean, these companies have tremendous political power as well in all of the countries in which they work, and tremendous responsibility that comes with that power. So we see that the challenge of a campaign like this is, of course, turning the commitments that we've seen, and we've seen some very positive ones, into real action, and encouraging companies to realize that this is very much about a long-term gain. So I know that companies are often driven by quarterly reporting, which is a huge challenge. I worked in the private sector for many years myself, and to change that trajectory into a long-term vision for the sustainability of their own business, and doing it for the right reasons, doing it because at the end of the day, the producers, the workers, the water, the land that food companies rely on, is everybody's, is theirs, is ours, is belonging to the planet. And without those things working correctly, and without us changing this direction that we find ourselves on, there won't be the consumers. There won't be the profits. There will be a very limited, narrow group of people that are the privileged few. And that's not in the interests of anybody, outside of it being obviously a moral and human rights imperative. So, we see that there is some positive commitment so far, but we also see that there's quite a distance to go. And we're encouraging a race to the top. This isn't about kind of bullying companies or being terribly negative towards companies. That's not what this program is about. It's about working with companies where we can, working with the public, engaging and encouraging them to participate, and setting up a trajectory that makes sense for all of us for the future. For enough, what we talk about in our Grow campaign is enough food for everyone all the time. It doesn't seem like that grossly ambitious a target, but we're a long way from there, and why the hell can't we get there?
So, thank you very much. And Jim and Jackie, I think bringing out the importance of accountability, I think is very important, and recognizing that what we're trying to achieve in this new framework will require a fundamentally different form of collaboration between businesses, governments, and civil society to achieve the challenges that we face, and that no one actor alone can get there. Business needs to take real bold leadership on this agenda, and we are seeing increasingly companies embrace, but also recognize the economic opportunities that there are. This is not just about looking at the challenges and being scared, but actually looking at those challenges and seeing them as opportunities, seeing them as market opportunities with millions of people who don't have access to essential services and technologies that can help expand reach. reducing and minimizing the costs that they're having on your value chain, whether it's the extreme weather events in the US that are having real costs on your factories.